Talked about wines that are extraordinary and life-changing. Yes, Pinot Noir can be that, but for the most part, Pinot Noir is forgettable and very expensive. So I look at Pinot Noir, noticing very, very teeny tiny grapes bunched closely together. The problem with grapes that are bunched closely together, like Pinot Noir, is actually if you look closely on the bottom of the left-hand bunch, you'll start to see some rotting. So because the grapes are so close together, there's not a lot of air circulation. So it's not uncommon for Pinot Noir to suffer from rot, which again adds to the whole idea of it being hard to grow and very expensive. So the folks, all of us here in Ontario, at least we like to pride ourselves on having really, really, really great climate for grape growing. So the X on the right-hand side, located in Europe, that's referring to where Burgundy is, which again is where absolutely that life-changing Pinot Noir comes from. And then looking on the right, roughly where that X is too, is in Niagara. So again, we are trying to draw a parallel there in terms of climate. And so Beaujolais, we mentioned already. And then the other regions in Burgundy. So starting right at the top, it's actually quite far from Burgundy, is Chablis. And that's the coolest region of Burgundy. And all Chablis is white wine production. So they only grow Chardonnay there. Moving further down, the Côte de Nuit and the Côte du Beaune, both red and white production happens there. Into the Côte Chalonnais, it's a mix too. The Mâconnais tends to be more white. Geographically speaking, this is a 2-hour drive from one spot to the other. So it's a teeny, teeny, tiny area, yet it has some of the biggest differentiation in soil types in the entire world. One thing that happened with Burgundy is that it is historically a heavily, heavily volcanic area, and as different faults shifted and volcanoes happened, what it would lift up a whole other soil type and cause another layer of soil or debris or vegetation to have another layer within the ground. And that's really what we have determined gives these wines such incredible character. So Burgundy is considered to be a geographic gift in that it is incredibly diverse and does create wines with incredible character. The other thing about Burgundy that is kind of mind-blowing is that it really only grows 3 grapes in Burgundy. Red grapes, Pinot Noir, Gamay, which we talked about, and then really only Chardonnay. So if you think about that, we're growing this incredible variety of wines from this really, really tiny area using only 3 grapes, then therefore it must be the land or the terroir, as it's known, that is causing these wines to be so incredible. So first we're going to talk about the Côte d'Or, then the Côte de Nuit. So these 2 regions together are the most expensive, most sought after, most incredible Pinot Noir wines in the world. If you wanted to buy some of this wine at the LCBO, and given that it's 2020, you could maybe buy a 17 or a 16 at the LCBO currently. You're looking at about $1,800 a bottle. But the thing is with this wine is that unless it's aged, you really wouldn't want to drink it anyway. So if you do have $1,800 and you want to spend it on a bottle of wine, come and talk to me. I'll make sure that you spend it well, but do not just walk into the LCBO and purchase a recent bottle of Pinot Noir. You'd be unfortunately wasting your money unless you did have a wine fridge and you were looking to cellar it. So similar to the VQA label, the Burgundy labels are made in a certain way. So they're always going to have alcohol content, just like Ontario. Always going to have the amount, the volume, the vintage, the producer, the appellation. So same as here we might have Niagara Peninsula, they might have Chambertin. So that's just referring to a specific area. And then it will tell you if it was bottled at the estate or if it was bottled in a different place. Not always, but frequently, bottled at the estate can infer a level of quality. So this is starting to get very complicated, and I apologize, and I wish I was with you in person because this really does take a little bit explaining. So I'm going to try to make this interesting, and I'm going to try and get the most important points across, and I'm going to try not to bore you in the meantime. So wish me luck. So here's the different regions in Burgundy. One thing that I think it would be good to know is simply the word Grand Cru or Premier Cru. So if someone starts throwing the word Grand Cru around at you, particular to Burgundy, I would definitely pay attention. That's someone that would really want to spend a lot of money. A Premier Cru Burgundy is also a very expensive wine and definitely worth your time and effort. Village Burgundy, also very, very good wines generally speaking. And then regional Burgundy, nothing to sneeze at either, but those would be probably in the $30 to $40 range. Whereas again, mentioned with Grand Cru, you could be easily looking at $2,000 plus. And the wine label here. So I will say, I'm not 100% sure, but I get the feeling that there may be some interpretation of wine labels in your near future, coming perhaps at you on a test or a quiz further down the road. So I would maybe try at least to look for a couple of things that you recognize and keep them in the back of your head so that when you are, or if you are presented a wine label, you're able to interpret it correctly. So Burgundy, it's easy. All you got to know is Pinot Noir and Gamay. And then the white grape is Chardonnay. But before we get too far, let's not forget about Aligoté. Aligoté, you may come across that in your wine travels. It's a lovely, refreshing, pleasant white, but is not considered to be a quality wine style. So, we've talked about Burgundy, we've talked about Pinot Noir, Gamay, and Chardonnay. We talked about Ontario, we talked about Gamay Noir, and then we're going to talk about another thin-skinned red, aka Cabernet Franc. So Cabernet Franc is both loved and hated in the wine world. Cabernet Franc makes beautiful wines some of the time, and average wines some of the time, and not very good wines some of the time. So you really have to know vintage, you have to know producer, and you have to know region if you're going to be dealing with Cabernet Franc. So Cabernet Franc, we know, is the parent grape of both Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. So raspberry, bramble, and bell pepper. The bell pepper is a real key component of Cabernet Franc. If you're ever tasting a wine and you smell bell pepper, it's at least, it may not be Cabernet Franc or it may not be Cabernet Sauvignon, but it's going to be at least one of the two of them. So if you smell bell pepper, Cabernet, 100% all the time. So strawberry, raspberry, bell pepper, crushed gravel, and chili pepper. So this does display a number of different aromas and flavors. So we know that a lot of Cabernet Franc comes from France. And generally speaking, if we can get Cabernet Franc from a cool climate with a long ripening season, we're going to drink exceptional Cabernet. But cool climate, long ripening season is very, very challenging, and not a lot of the places in the world have that. So I would say for the most part that if people are growing Cabernet Franc, they're probably either not going to be growing it for very long, or they would have to absolutely know what it is that they're doing because it's not a very popular wine. So we're going to come back to this lovely chart that we've looked at before. And this just lays out the quality wine stipulations. So if you're looking on a label as a wine lover, you're going to see AOC, you might see QBA, DOC, DOCG, etc., etc. Most of the time, yes, there is some association of these labels with quality, but not always. What it means usually is that they're made in a specific traditional way. So we are going to skip this, unfortunately. And then a little bit of food and wine pairing here. So multi-course meals, say if you're doing 5 or 6 courses, tasting menu, always a light wine first. Riesling's great. I would even say to want to do maybe a glass of sparkling, maybe a glass of champagne or Prosecco. Moving on to their Riesling would probably be a good choice. You could even do something lighter than Riesling. You could do an easy Pinot Grigio. Always dry wines before sweet wines. Always low alcohol before high alcohol. If a wine-based sauce is used, drink the same wine. That said, if the wine that's in the sauce is not very good, do not drink that wine. There's a ton of other tasting ideas that we can talk about. And then keeping in mind that the wine should always be sweeter than the dessert. And so I'll talk about this a little bit here. So the idea that we talked about in class was the idea of a classic match. So if you're ever doing cuisine from a specific area, be it Tuscany, be it Hungary, be it Switzerland, be it Alsace, given that foods and wines in these regions have been grown and produced together for hundreds and hundreds of years, 9 times out of 10, this is the easiest, best way to pair. If that doesn't work, and sometimes it doesn't, one thing that we talked about in class last time was pairing with the protein in the course. So say, oh, I'm pairing it with salmon, therefore I'll do this. Or I'm pairing it with fish or haddock or pickerel or whatever, but I'll do this. Well, that's absolutely true. You need to always consider the preparation method and always consider the sauce. Because a salmon à la Meunière done with brown butter is incredibly different from a spicy salmon or a teriyaki salmon. So always consider the protein, yes, but always consider how it is prepared. So things that are really hard to pair: chocolate, vinegar, eggs. Eggs you can kind of get away with. When in doubt with eggs, because it's usually brunch or lunch, champagne, no problem. Artichokes and asparagus, very hard to pair with. Spicy wines, generally speaking, off-dry, high acidity. High acidity, of course, means low alcohol. So one of the worst kind of pairings together is spice and alcohol because they just make the other one feel stronger. So avoid spice and high alcohol at all costs. Eggs, go with champagne. When in doubt, Riesling, and chocolate, always go sweet. So we will hopefully get another chance to talk about this together, and I certainly hope so. And we'll talk a little bit more about assignments in a separate presentation. Again, I miss you. I hope you're doing well, and I want to see you soon. Take care. Bye.